It's time to address this. They've lied to us about processed foods, and eating everything in moderation is damaging our health. So in this video, I'm gonna tell you the health effects of processed foods, and I'm gonna give you 10 examples of foods to avoid. Welcome to the second episode of Your Health Decoded. I'm Rosa, I'm a biomedical scientist from King's College London. I'm a Mayo Clinic trained health coach, and I specialize in metabolic health through the European Institute of Metabolomic Medicine. I'm also the chief scientist at Kyma Health, where we help people optimize their health using lifestyle and nutrition. So what are the health effects of processed foods? And why is eating everything in moderation damaging our health? First, we have to define what processed foods are. So there are different types of food processing. We have minimally processed foods or non-processed foods, which are good for our health. Those include foods that are closer to their natural form. For example, eggs, meat, dairy. There are things that you would normally find in your kitchen. Processed foods refer to foods that we have processed in order to make them last longer, but in natural ways. And the main two ways of processing are through fermentation and salt. These two ways have positive effects towards the nutrient density of foods. On the other hand, we have ultra-processed foods, which have negative effects towards our health. Ultra-processed foods are foods that have undergone a lot of processing, usually in industrial level chains, and include ingredients that we would normally not find in a kitchen. These are chemical additives, flavorings, colorings, or any type of preservative that is produced in a lab. Right now, there's a big battle happening between the food industry on one hand, trying to convince us that eating ultra-processed foods is safe, and on the other hand, we have the scientific community trying to tell people why ultra-processed foods are so damaging to our health. So let's look at the actual scientific data. There was a study, an umbrella review, which looked at multiple studies, that was published at the British Medical Journal in 2024. They looked at 45 meta-analysis, which corresponds to a population size of 9 million people, 9.8 million people to be precise. And they found that consuming ultra-processed foods is linked to a total of 32 diseases. It is linked to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, gastrointestinal disorders like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, asthma, sleep disturbances, even depression. In fact, consuming ultra-processed foods increases our chances of developing cardiovascular disease by 66% and also increases the chances of developing depression by 22%. So the data is there. We have so much data indicating that processed foods, ultra-processed foods, have such negative effects towards our health. However, we have also facts from America and from Europe that 50 to 70% of the calories we consume comes from ultra-processed foods. Why is that? On one hand, we have the food industry that's using marketing tactics to convince us that ultra-processed foods are safe. This includes packaged snacks that are high in protein, as they say, or them criticizing the quality of the data that we have. The food industry or people that are paid by the food industry are saying that the evidence we have is limited and low quality because it is from epidemiological studies, which are considered lower quality data. This is true. However, the real question here is how safe are ultra-processed foods? And we also need to consider that any toxicity studies conducted refer to a single ingredient each time. However, in ultra-processed foods, you find an abundance of ingredients which are made in the lab all together. So the effect in the human body can be endless. So what we actually need to do here is not for us to prove, us as in the scientific community, that ultra-processed foods are bad for our health. It is for the food industry to prove that they are safe, and it has failed to do so far. How do we distinguish between ultra-processed foods and non-processed foods? Consider something packaged that you will find in the supermarket. If you turn around the packaging and you see that it has beans, salt, and water, simple example of canned beans. This is non-processed and it is safe to consume. Ultra-processed foods, on the other hand, you will grab something like a snack, you will turn around, look at the packaging, and you will find colorings, you will find hydrogenated seed oils, you will find substances that you don't even recognize the name of them and that you cannot normally find in your kitchen. This is how you can detect ultra-processed foods and avoid them. Sometimes they also contain ingredients like high fructose corn syrup or sweeteners like saccharin and aspartame. They have also usually undergone pre-processing, for example, snacks that have been pre-fried. So the key takeaway here is to always look at the ingredients list of whatever we buy from the supermarket and watch out for preservatives or substances that we don't know what they are and are not found in our kitchen. There can also be times where two foods are very similar and one is ultra-processed and the other one is minimally processed, but they still belong in the same category. Let's consider, for example, ham or cured meats. Prosciutto ham, prosciutto di Parma, is non-processed. This is because it has very strict development standards. It can only contain sea salt, otherwise it cannot have the name of prosciutto di Parma. So this is a good quality meat that you can eat. On the other hand, and in the same category, we have hot dogs. Hot dogs are a classic example of ultra-processed foods. Why is that? Is that we have blended meat that is produced in a factory that has multiple lines of processing. Once they blend the meats and all the types of ingredients, the color is quite bland, so they add colorings. The flavor is also not the best because they use the worst parts of the meat, so they add flavor enhancers. They also add preservatives to make it last longer. And this leads us to having the hot dogs, which are in the same category as prosciutto di Parma, although one is processed, ultra-processed, and the other one is minimally processed. So always watch out for the ingredients list of anything that you buy in order to avoid consuming ultra-processed foods. What are some more examples of ultra-processed foods that we can avoid? The first example is something that is commonly known to be an ultra-processed food, which is packaged snacks, like chips, for example. The second category that's not often detected as an ultra-processed foods, and many of us can consume as breakfast, but has very damaging effects towards our health, are cereals. It's a fact that certain cereals can spike our blood glucose even more than sugar itself. Other types of cereals have a glycemic index of 85, which is extremely high compared to fruits, for example, or vegetables. So consuming cereal, and even more so consuming them for breakfast, is not a good health option. The third category is packaged bread. Now here we do need to make a distinction, is that we can have packaged bread that lasts for around 3 days and has only flour, salt, and water. This type of bread is good. On the other hand, most packaged breads, which are used to create a sandwich, for example, contain seed oils and are also considered ultra-processed. This leads us to the fourth category of ultra-processed food, which are seed oils. Seed oils are an ultra-processed ingredient that is found in almost all ultra-processed foods. When we talk about seed oils, we're referring to sunflower oil, rapeseed oil, canola oil, or soybean oil, which are produced in high temperatures. And this is why they're considered ultra-processed. On the other hand, seed oils that are produced in low temperatures can actually have beneficial effects over our health. But most seed oils are produced in high temperatures. And what this does is it damages the fatty acids that they contain. It oxidizes them, so then they integrate with our cell membranes, they integrate inside our fat tissues, and they accumulate inside our body for years and years. This is also why eating in moderation is damaging our health, because eating in moderation seed oils or foods that contain seed oils leads them to accumulate inside our body for years. It's not that we will eat them one time and then our body will be able to eliminate them. In fact, it's estimated that seed oils produce more than 10,000 toxic substances, similarly to cigarette smoke. The next category is packaged sweets or baked goods. Sometimes you think that you will grab something from the local bakery, but local bakeries usually use seed oils because they are cheaper as well. Also, any sort of cracker, rusk, or cookie, even savory cookies, are considered ultra-processed usually if you look at the ingredients behind, and they contain all of the additives that we talked about and the seed oils as well. So watch out for those. Then are something that we consume often and that we consider a nice snack, which are yogurts that are like dessert yogurts or high protein yogurts. These are also very ultra processed and they cause our blood glucose to spike, and they have very negative effects towards our health as well. Another very common option for people is milk from nuts, almond milk, for example. This is not considered milk. Naming it milk is just a marketing tactic used by the food industry in order to make it more appealing and make it represent actual milk. But in fact, in order to produce these types of milk and to make them end up looking like milk, they have undergone large degrees of processing, and they also have additives to make them last longer. There are some brands that have these types of milk without any preservatives and additives. However, it's important to note that these types of milks have high levels of oxalates. Oxalates are a type of anti-nutrients, let's say, that damage our blood vessels, they accumulate in our joints, and they can also cause kidney stones. So even though we might find some of these milks that do not have any additives, we need to consider that they are not the best option for our health. As we talked about before, the next category are processed meats, and this includes ham or sausages or any type of deli meat that is not just cured with salt, like the prosciutto that we talked about before. Another very interesting category is certain types of cheese that are not made from 100% milk. These are usually cheeses that don't melt easily or that they melt very extensively. These have added ingredients in order to make them have this effect. Another very popular category that people use before the gym for energy and during the day as a quick snack is any type of cereal bar or any type of protein bar. These have usually more than 15 ingredients, and I might be underestimating here, and they are also considered an ultra-processed food. Finally, a sort of instant food or something that we can prepare very quickly that has undergone processing, like instant noodles, or frozen snacks like meatballs that have been pre-fried, French fries, or even sweet potato fries that are pre-prepared. These are also considered ultra-processed. They're a classic example, and it is the best option to avoid them. So let's put everything together. Today we talked about what ultra-processed foods are. They are foods that have additives, sweeteners, flavorings, things that are not found in our kitchen. We talked about the health effects of processed foods, looking at the study of 45 meta-analysis that they cause cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, depression, and are linked to 32 diseases in total. And then we looked at 10 examples of processed foods to avoid, including cereal, baked goods, protein bars, even bread that can be ultra-processed, of course processed meats, and milk from nuts like almond milk. So the key takeaway from today is that we need to eliminate ultra-processed foods from our diet, and a good way to do that is by looking at the ingredients of anything packaged that we buy. So next time you go to the supermarket and want to put something packaged inside your cart, turn it around, read the ingredients, and if it's any more than 3 or 4 ingredients and anything that you don't find in your kitchen, choose another one. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any more of our videos, and I'll see you in the next one.